Board of October 8th. This is Jennifer Ogden, and we'll get started. Pamela has already taken roll by having people just report in. And so any additions or deletions to the agenda? We will go right into public comment, and so I will call you. Carol Ellis, why don't we get your comments first?
Thank you. Carol Ellis, 2015 East 36. I'd like to point out that the first time I ever heard vacant land applied to city parks property was when a proposal came from the new fire chief, Bobby Williams, to put in a fire station right below the Japanese gardens in Manitou Park. Well, when the park board heard about it, it took them only a week to decide, no, there will be no fire station just to the north side of the Japanese Tsutakawa Gardens in Manitou Park. So I asked the park board to consider it their duty to preserve the Hamblin Park site for the park use, and just as the fire station found another site, to ask utilities to find another site. Secondly, I would like to point out that during the prior city administration, there were efforts to clamp down on the park board's independence, but it didn't happen, and that's because there's a fine tradition, starting with Stan Witter, of making parks align with schools, of making very community-minded parks in the city of Spokane. You can't beat it when you go in the west. From going to the border with California or Arizona all the way to Spokane, there's hardly a city that has our park system with the goal of 2 miles for every person to walk to a park. That's our Hamblin Park, and we want it to stay in that use. Thank you, Park Board.
Thank you. Very good. All right. Mary Hardy.
Thank you. I'm Mary Hartsey. I live at 2020 East 36th Avenue, and I'm here today to add my voice to the growing opposition to the proposed construction of a water tower in Hamblin Park. You will hear later in this meeting from City Engineer Dan Bowler. I attended 2 of Mr. Bowler's presentations as to why utilities must locate this tank in our beautiful neighborhood park. He will present as though the decision is a foregone conclusion, the only logical conclusion, and make vague references that we will bear unimaginable costs if utilities is not granted its wish to build in Hamblin. He will minimize the impact on the park and try to distract from that impact by redirecting us to focus on mitigations or enhancements after the tower is built. Hamblin Park is a natural park, designated conservation land. No mitigations or enhancements could possibly restore the sanctuary of the park, replace the mature ponderosa pine, serviceberry, arrowleaf balsam root, and other native plants and wildflowers, which will be forever lost if this tower is permitted to be constructed in the park. As you listen to Mr. Bowler's presentation, please bear in mind that he made a very similar pitch in 2019 when testifying before the hearing examiner to secure a conditional use permit and variance to construct the water tower on city purchased land at 32nd and Napa. In a 19-page findings, conclusions, and decision, the hearing examiner concluded that this 2.03-acre site was, quote, an ideal site to situate a reservoir. He cited testimony of Mr. Bowler that, quote, because the proposal is for a water tower, the area of relatively high elevation and solid rock actually provide an ideal platform for the proposed use. Now engineering services has moved away from this site, expressing difficulties in creating a staging area for construction. Yet much money and time were spent in purchasing the land, investigating, gathering reports, making determinations, and ultimately testifying that it was ideal. I cite Dan Bowler's testimony before the hearing examiner as a cautionary tale. What he deemed, quote, ideal, what was so strongly advocated for, is now being applied to Hamblin Park. Hamblin Park was not the chosen or ideal site then, and it is far, far from ideal now. Other sites for this tank have been identified as feasible in the engineer's report. None of those other sites are parkland. With the right focus, a persuasive case can be made to find one of those sites ideal. In conclusion, I urge the park board to exercise your independent authority and protect this small residential park, so vital to the mental and physical well-being of hundreds of residents. Do not allow this proposed encroachment of a 2 million gallon water tank by city utilities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary. Very cogently argued. All right. Sherry Walk and Kirby.
I can't.
Yes, I'll be speaking for both Jennifer and
But
myself.
so far, the three people have spoken are very in favor of the park.
Okay, so we're getting a little feedback. So I'm calling for the phone number ending in 86. So let's hear from that person. Jerry.
Yes,
Or
I'll be
Kirby.
speaking for both. Yep,
Okay,
I'll be speaking for Jennifer and myself. Yep, so my name's Kirby Walk. I'm on 2652 East 40th. Hamlin Park is definitely in our neighborhood. So I'm speaking against putting a water tower in Hamlin Park. As all of us noticed during this pandemic, many of our park spaces saw a tremendous increase of use. Hamlin Park was certainly one of those. So I think we definitely notice and we understand how beneficial our open space lands are, especially undeveloped lands like Hamlin Park. One thing I did notice in the engineering meeting was that we never got an explanation as to why all of a sudden the Napa and 32nd Avenue property became unusable for the water tower. So that's one thing I would like to hear. Another comment I have about the engineering meeting is that it was quite insulting to hear that in order for us to get crosswalks, that we were going to have to give up part of our parkland. That was made as a possible solution. If we gave up part of our parkland, maybe we could finally have crosswalks. So that's something that I definitely took offense to. And lastly, I think we're undervaluing what giving up, even if it is a small piece of our park, is. That is not worth offsetting the cost of some of these other more feasible areas. That's all I have to say. Again, this is for Kirby and Jennifer Walk, that we are opposed to putting a water tower in Hamlin Park.
Thank you.
All right. Heather Stooner.
Hi, my name is Heather Stooner. I live at 1926 East 36th Street. I am definitely opposed to having the water tower in that park. It's a space that I go to for peace and tranquility all times of year. And I just have to say that the wildflowers that grow in that park grow nowhere else. You can go to Lincoln Park. You can go to High Drive. Of course, Manitou doesn't have the wildflowers that this park has. I am definitely looking for the Parks Department to uphold their duty to create our space natural and leave it alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. All right. Mercy Walani.
Yes, I'm here. I live at 2204 East 34th Avenue. My husband and I both endorsed putting the water tower in Hamlin Park. We have not lived here only 20 years, and it never seemed like a park to what we're used to. It's very scary in the summer because it gets very dry. I love the springtime and all the wildflowers. I don't think that the tower is going to detract from the park at all. It'll fit into the natural landscape. And like all things, nobody likes to have something change their life, but we all have to deal with that. Hence the pandemic. And there are some people will be upset if they don't have water. So I don't know. In a little while, nobody will notice it's there at all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Connie Scott. Phone number ending in 07. Connie. All right, we'll come back to Connie. Diane Virgil. Phone number ending in 15.
Thank you. My name is Diane Virgil, and I live at 36 in Crestline. And I want to thank all of you for serving on the park board. Parks are not vacant city land waiting for someone to come along and think of another use for them. This park is already being used as a conservation park. I oppose the construction of the water tank in Hamblin Park. Many people will share their stories with you of what the park means to them. City Engineering Services will share a story with you about why they believe Hamblin Park is the perfect site for their proposed water tower. Theirs is a revisionist story. The truth is they conducted a site selection process in 2018, which determined that Hamblin Park was not the best location for a water tank. At that time, they were so determined to protect parkland that they purchased private property. That property was not city property, specifically for the construction of the tank. They were so certain that that parcel of land was the perfect site that they went through a conditional use permitting process. They were so sure that that site was the perfect site that they gave testimony under oath that this was the ideal site. City Engineering Services was correct in 2018 when they determined that Hamblin Park was not the appropriate location for a water tower. Please ask them to share with you all documents and communication from the 2018 site selection process, so the whole story, the true story, can be told. City engineers now say that they were wrong about the site at 31st and Napa. I personally don't believe that they would make such an egregious error, and I echo what was said earlier, that they need to be honest with you and with the public about why they're backing away from that site. They want us to believe that they could make this error. If I accept that the city engineers were wrong about the 31st and Napa site, then by extension, we must also believe that they can and likely are mistaken when they tell us that Hamblin Park is the perfect site. I urge you to preserve Hamblin Park as a conservation park. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Mark Milheim. Ending in 9.
Hi there. Hey, mine's pretty short. I want to voice my opposition to modifying the land, the park. And my question is just one looking for data on. I don't, in the engineering meeting, I don't recall anything quantitative on why the park has to be, or the water tank has to be put in now. I heard the qualitative comments that for fire flows and just in general, we're running out of capacity, but and I don't even know how to go about challenging this and looking at it. But my question is, why does it have to be now? Where's the quantitative data that says it has to be built? And by the way, if it has to be built, when does it have to be built by? And what's driving? What exactly is the driver behind this has to be built? Like starting next spring, I believe it is.
Okay, Mark, I think that some of those questions might be answered in today's presentation. So, all right, Rebecca Randall. Only in 2-1?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
I apologize. My name's Rebecca Randall. My husband and I and our 2 kids live at 4206 South Martin Street. And so the first, maybe this was addressed somewhere else, but hopefully maybe it will be addressed in the presentation, is when they show the map and the footprint of the water tower, it seems like it's just the water tower. And most of the water towers that I see also have associated buildings with them and structures, and then they also have a fencing around them. So I can't imagine that this is just the water tower. So I would think it would take up a bigger area than they're proposing that I see. So hopefully that'll be addressed. And then the second thing, we're very much opposed to this. This is a natural area. It's an open space for kids and adults alike to spend time and be imaginative and play. And that area is so scarce for kids these days. And I'm kind of floored that they would propose this in a park area. I've I don't know why they can't use another space. It looks like there were other spaces that would be just as good to me. And just because it doesn't cost a little bit more doesn't mean it's not just as good. And it would just be a small price to pay to keep open space for the community. And the other thing I felt a little bit offended by is that they would put money towards other parks in my neighborhood, but there are no other parks in my neighborhood. All the other parks are more than a mile away, and it's not an easy walk with 2 kids. And this is my neighborhood park. This is where I spend time, and this is where my kids play. And to ruin it with a water tower just seems like everything that a parks department should be against. So I thank you guys for your time, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to give Connie Scott another chance. Connie, are you there? You didn't get your chance earlier to speak. You have a phone number ending in 07. Connie. Okay. We'll maybe try to catch her. Let's see. We have a phone number ending in 76. Didn't get your name. Phone number ending in 76. All right. Phone number ending in 62. All right. Well, we have 3 people that maybe are just listening, so we will give them a chance.
Hello.
Oh, here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Yan Densmore. I live off 38th and Napa, and my wife and I are opposed to construction of the water tower in Hamlin Park. I've shared my thoughts with many on this board via letters. I agree with most of what's already been voiced by the other opposition on this call. It's just critical that we maintain our parkland and open space and not use it for city utility infrastructure such as this when there are other viable sites available. I feel like the decision to put the park here was very short-sighted. There was, as others alluded to, a different site selected, and for a variety of reasons that didn't work out. But to just move it to the nearest park because it costs less is just, frankly, just makes me very upset that that's the decision-making process. I'm seeing now that the previous site is being developed and clear-cut for some other form of development. I'd be curious to see how that factored into the utilities and engineering department's decision to move the water tank from there and other city officials. I don't have too much else to say that wouldn't already be restating what others have said. So again, I just definitely oppose it. We need to maintain our parks, and especially the natural areas like this that are so few in our neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so last chance here. Connie, I think somebody noted you were muted. Maybe you can unmute yourself and be able to hear you. Connie Scott, ending in 07. You have a mute symbol on. Same with the phone number ending in 76. You all unmute. Oh, there we go. Connie, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. Thank you. This is very important to me. My name is Connie Scott. I live at 1921 East 37th, kitty corner from the park. First of all, I want the Parks Board to know that I walk in that park every single day. I've lived here for 19 years. Please listen, first of all, to the people who actually use the park. I heard somebody recently say, it's scary, and it's not scary. For those of us that require the outdoors, it's the only bit of outdoors we have. And one thing I so appreciate about this park is it's like being in the woods. I've been a camper my whole life. The other parks are well-groomed, except for maybe Lincoln, but this park is natural, and it is let me just say, green space is sacred space, especially for those of us that require a dose of nature. When I come home from work, I'm out in that park. I walk my dog there every day. I want the Parks Board to recognize that our neighborhood recently lost 25 acres of green space. It wasn't Parks property. It wasn't city property. It was owned by a very generous person who allowed neighbors to walk the hiking trails. That's going to become the new green space, Greenstone development. So we've lost that. But not just lost the green space, we have lost what we're taking on in exchange. We're going to have 230 residential units move into our neighborhood. There will be an extra 250 new car trips every single day coming through our neighborhood. It makes the green space, the little 9 acres we have left with Hamblin, all the more valuable. And I echo what somebody else said just a bit ago, that I find the words of the Parks Department really hollow when they say that the project would include funding for city park upgrades within the neighborhood. I beg to differ. We are losing our neighborhood. We are going to be inundated with a lot of new neighbors, and we need this space. There are no other parks in the neighborhood. And I just know that the engineers in this city are very smart. They can make other of the sites that have been taken into consideration, they can make them work. First of all, I think the water tower should be put in the Greenstone development. People who buy a home or an apartment, move in with their business there, will do so with full knowledge that look at that water tower right there. They'll know. 9 acres is a small plot of land to put such a monstrosity that is so unnatural there. And the other possibility would be where there's already a water tower at 37th and Stone. Oh, it's not so perfect. I'm sure that clever, very creative people and smart engineers can make it work. So please leave our one little tiny plot of natural land that we have in this neighborhood. Please leave it pristine, leave it natural, leave it beauty in every season, those wildflowers that go through all of the iterations from one month to the next. Leave it just as it is. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, phone number ending in 76, you are muted. Would you like to speak?
Well, I'm 6325.
Aha, okay.
And I have a book. My name's Carolyn Falk, and I just want to say that I live at 4322 South Stone, and Hamblin Park was one of the reasons I wanted to move into the neighborhood. And I've lived here since March, and I also want to say no to the water tower in the park. I am an engineer by training, and everything is possible when it comes to engineering. I mean, we've sent things into space. So what I feel is engineering services, they've just gotten lazy due to the cost of finding another site that's not in our park. And that possibly, are they bowing down to the realtor or the real estate developers? So Greenstone can, sell more money of having, hey, here's a vacant parcel right behind your house you could walk into behind Touchmark. And we've just seen with COVID, we need this open space more than ever, and have it be natural, remain natural. It will be destroyed, the atmosphere and ambience, if this water tower is built in our park. And I just want to say, protect the native trees, shrubs, plants, and for our future generations. I have a young 4-month-old daughter. I want her to be able to go play in the woods, and it's not too far from the home. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? We've had a few other people join, also ending in 29. Anybody else want to speak? Looking at phone number ending in 62, phone number ending in 76. You were all muted, so unmute yourself if you'd like to speak. Otherwise, we will move on. This has been very good public comment. I have to say there are a lot of good public speakers in Hamblin Park. Yes.
Hello. My name is My name is Anwar Peace, and I am a Spokane Human Rights Commissioner. I'm calling today about Seattle Municipal Code 12.06A.040, dealing with the changing of park regulations We, as a Spokane Human Rights Commission, were just made aware of this possible change to the ordinance in our last meeting. And several of us commissioners have a concern about the chilling effect that freedom of speech might have if this new ordinance goes into effect. I just received an email from another commissioner today saying that City Legal has weighed in on this issue, and we are being assured that First Amendment rights won't be violated. While that is nice to hear, we are also concerned as the Human Rights Commission about the vulnerable population that of homeless individuals and other individuals that are in the vulnerable category that inhabit our parks and enjoy our parks as well. So I just wanted to make this board aware that we as a commission will be eagerly looking at the final draft of this legislation and making sure that it aligns correctly with the human rights of all individuals in Spokane being protected. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you. Anybody else? We've had a few other people join. It looks like, okay, 6-2, you are muted. 7-6, you are muted. Sorry, the only way I have of telling you apart when you're just calling in is your phone number. So, all right. Any others? Otherwise, we will move on. This has been very good public testimony.
Hello.
Yes?
This is Mary Mackey, 3730 South Lee Street. I had questions about if you build this structure, how much blasting are you going to do? Because there's quite a bit of basalt in this area. And my other question was, because I've gone to water runoff meetings in the past. I've lived here 50 years. And the water runs down in that direction towards the school and that part of Hamlin Park from a hill that's across the street from us. And I wonder how that's going to be affected. How deep is the structure going to go down? How many floors? Because it looks pretty big.
Okay. Hopefully those questions will be answered when we actually hear from the engineering later in the meeting.
And my other concern is because it is a natural park, it doesn't need any additional water or anything. It just exists on what grows there naturally, and it's always been a lovely park. So that's my other, and other people have just addressed that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, phone number ending in 76. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself? I think I caught everybody. Very good feedback today, folks.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Great.
Well, this is Michael Sauce at 2176. Is that what you're asking? And I'm at 3708 South Napa. Been here for 44 years, and the beauty of the park is wonderful and natural. And I would hate to see that a cement spike would be put in the middle of that park, separating our wonderful neighborhood from the neighbors on the other side of the park. It has the natural flowers that I've enjoyed my whole life living here in Spokane, and to start pushing in cement abutments in the middle of the park would not be beneficial for the neighborhood. That's my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your feedback. Okay. Let's see. I think as I go through the scroll of numbers here, we've heard from everybody, but let me say one more time. Anybody who is muted that we haven't heard from? If not, thank you again very much. We need to proceed with our agenda. Again, for today, it's just a discussion item on the water tower, not an action item. All right. We will proceed then with the consent agenda. You will see park board members. There are 4 items on the consent agenda. Do any park board members want an item taken off of that consent agenda? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second that, Jennifer.
Okay. Anything else? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good. So the consent agenda has passed, and now we have Garrett, who is going to give a talk on the budget.
Righty, thank you. Good afternoon, Park Board. And too, I just want to thank all the citizens that chimed in and gave public testimony today. I mean, this is what it's all about as staff and working with the Park Board, is to hear from the citizens. So it's very helpful, and we appreciate it. And so Jennifer, so we're on the monthly update. Did you want me to give my overall update now, or financials?
I thought you were going to give your sort of overall update now before we went into financials to sort of set the stage.
Perfect. All right, here, let me share my screen. Hopefully. All right, does everybody see that? On the perfect. All right, well, thank you. And, you know, quite a year. Here we are, October, going to present you the 2021 budget. I just want to thank all the staff, all the input from the Park Board, and all the support that we've gotten from City Council and the Mayor's office. It's been a year, but we've sure learned a lot, and we sure have a lot of silver linings through this as well. And, you know, before we can really know where we're going, we need to know where we've been. And I think one of the strategies that we implemented this year that really helped launch us into a financial state that we're stable this year is looking at our current service model and implementing a core service model, really focusing on the true functions of Parks and Recreation and the assets that we're trying to protect. And that is something that we've learned a lot from. A lot of different perspectives on how we operate, and it's going to continue forward into the future. You know, when we talk about impacts, it is nothing short from some major impacts that we had in 2020. And as you know, 70% of our budget comes from 8% of the general fund expenditures, and 30% of that budget comes from program revenues, so fees and charges and attractions and events. That had a huge hit to our budget. So with that, we were down about 2/3 of our normal staff capacity at some points in the season, about 150 to 200 staff employees not with us this year. And so what we did was we shifted our model into full-time staff, taking on a lot of that role in different roles and doing our best to really take care of our properties and preserve our assets. And with that, you know, communication is at the top of the list as we communicate with our citizens, our users, our stakeholders of where we're headed in the future, and that was crucial through this time period. Another response is just these are huge numbers, and it just shows you the impact just for Riverfront. Compared this time to last year in 2019, almost 1 million guests. So these are tickets bought in Riverfront Park. So 4 Spokanes did not go down to Riverfront Park this year, and they did last year. Keep in mind too, half of our park last year was under construction as well, which already had an impact. So this is a significant impact, and that just shows you a lot of that direct effect that it had on our budget, but also what we're trying to provide to the citizens. And you know, you can see 214 of those 250 planned events at Riverfront were canceled. Of course, we tried to really look at postponing first, and we did, and working very well and being flexible with our event organizer, but these are a lot of things that just wasn't able to happen in the phase 2. You know, in recreation, I mean, these are huge numbers too. I mean, over 3,000 cancellations in our programs, camps, swim lessons, over 1,000 athletic field reservations. You know, the biggest hit of all is no aquatic season. So, you know, having all our 6 pools closed this year was a tough pill to swallow for us, not being able to provide that, and also providing jobs. Tim see over almost 200 jobs to our young professionals out there. But with that too, we've gotten creative on a lot of what you'll see in our activity guides that are usually printed. We have been able to condense and do online ones because things change. Things are very dynamic in this environment. So we wanted to be very flexible during this time and still provide safe opportunities for the citizens. And with that, we looked at different rolling timelines and assessing what the impacts are and how do we prepare for the future and looking at partnerships when we're looking at programs and events. And so, the biggest silver lining, and then we always have to look in the positive of what this year brought. And I think the biggest one is teamwork, communication across all avenues in Parks and Recreation, collaboration with different divisions, utilities, neighborhood services, planning and development, coordination with our county, our partners at our county. Rather than competition, let's work together on achieving the same goal. Different innovation and resilience, thinking of 4th of July in a whole different way. Bringing financial strength to our division. We were able to strategically plan our finances this year that did not deplete our reserves year to date or take away from future opportunities. And I think that's huge. And most of all, too, is we knew and we saw firsthand, and a lot of these citizens today mentioned it, parks and open space are so important. And when there's a pandemic and things are closed and there's nothing else to do, we saw a huge increase in our parks and open space. And no other line of business saw a potential 30% decrease in their budget, but an 80% increase in park usage. That just showed that parks and recreation is an essential function to Spokane, and people take pride in their parks and their programs. So how do we build off of that? There was a lot to learn thus far in our priorities in our 2021 budget. And right at the top of the list is a coordinated and safe effort to continue to reopen our parks, facilities, events, community engagement, and outdoor recreation activities. So that starts from all the way from the governor's office to our local health district, our staff, the city council, mayor's office, other departments, how we continue to provide safe opportunities. With that too is a plan, in today's or 2021's proposed budget is enhances accountability, but also gives flexibility, because we know it's a changing environment. So when we look at our program revenues, it's almost like your checkbook. If you have a stack of checks, but there's no money in the bank, you don't use those checks. And so that's really our program revenue. We know what that core service is, but also if we do open sooner than we anticipate, we have that flexibility. Now we have checks as that revenue comes in to be able to provide those services. Continue to make data-driven decisions. Of course, what's the impact to the community that we can provide and do it in a safe manner. Continue to invest in our full-time staff. This is the most important piece, is to continue the great effort that our staff has done this year into 2021. So in our proposed budget, you do not see any current filled FTEs proposed to be eliminated. With that, we do propose no staff increases and not filling some of those vacancies, but no full-time staff being eliminated in 2021. Continue to build great partnerships and preparing for the reduction in the general fund. And what we want to do is provide consistency and a slow reopening plan to the public that is thoughtful and that makes sense. As you know, so our 8% is calculated off of the last full fiscal year of the general fund expenditures. So this year, we're operating what the general fund spent, and that 8% in 2018. Next year is what the general fund spent in 2019. And as you can imagine, what the general fund spent in 2020 and 2021 is going to be a decrease. So we need to plan for 2022 and 2023. And in this budget, that's what it does. We're not looking at any new staff increases, no new programs, and no significant expansion in current programs. 3 areas that we're looking in our savings is, you'll see in Mark's budget, is our adopted budget is unbalanced. It's an unbalanced budget over almost $300,000, and so that sets us up for success right off the bat. The other is still enlisting a modified hiring freeze that will remain in place and strategically filling full-time positions and temp seasonal positions that meet the core services and the pre-approved programs. And then also our continued core service model, at least within the first 2 quarters, of still full-time staff doing things that are a little bit out of the norm and working together, and then also looking at methodically bringing on temp seasonal staff as we ramp up during the season. Program revenue, this is a huge one, and we want to continue to give us the flexibility to adapt and come up with recovery plans across the division, and this really gives us a good roadmap as we phase to reopening the plans. We'll coordinate with the state and local health officials. And how we're going to do this is we're going to continue to work on what worked well this year. And that is each program before it is launched. So the ICE ribbon is an example. Day camps are an example. We're going to have an impact assessment. We're going to have a budget analysis of what are the impacts to that program and what are the policies and procedures, communication around the safety measures that we need to make, ongoing coordination, and of course the evaluation of what worked well and what didn't, because we want to have these, we want to learn from our mistakes, learn what worked well, and be able to adapt that in the future. So with that is the overall strategy and priorities for the 2020 budget. Is there any questions?
Well done, Garrett and family. Well done. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? If not, Mr. Mark Buning has been very patient, but that does set the stage for how we look at the budget coming up here. So, Mr. Buning, take it away.
Let me try to share my screen here. Let's see. Okay. So here we're presenting today the financial report through the end of the 3rd quarter of 2020. And again, this will be a little bit of deja vu all over again. We see a lot of the same trends we have seen for the most of the year. We'll see that we are significantly under the 2-year average historical budget for both revenues and expenditures. Our first slide here, we look at our Fund 1400 Parks Fund expenditures. We see that our expenditures are about $5.7 million below the historical budget average. This is due to, as Garrett mentioned, many of our classes and programs, our revenue-generating activities being shut down this year. And this demonstrates also the strict control of the temp seasonal expenditures and the tight discipline of park staff over all of our expenditures. I mean, everything is really looked at very closely. And really, basically, as Garrett mentioned, we are maintaining just our core services and, and cannot provide any of the other services that we typically historically provide. So looking at revenues, we see that our year-to-date revenues are about $3.4 million under the 2-year historical average. Once again, most of our revenue-generating programs have not been able to operate. However, our general fund has been our general fund transfer has been maintained at our budgeted levels to again support those essential staff and core services. Now, again, here the 3rd graph where we look at comparing year-to-date revenues and expenditures. And through the end of the 3rd quarter, revenues have exceeded expenditures by approximately $2.2 million. We hope to maintain this surplus or a significant surplus through the end of the year to provide some financial cushion that anticipated leveling out of our reduction of our general fund transfer in 2022 and 2023. Any questions before we head on into the Gulf Fund? Okay. We'll do the same here. Our golf expenditures are about $400,000 less than our budgeted average. Again, this is due primarily to a late start to the season due to COVID and watching all of the expenditures very closely, primarily temp seasonal and some of our other operational accounts. However, golf has been a shining star. Look at our revenues. We see an interesting picture here. The actual revenues are beating the historical average by about $255,000, despite that early closure early in the season. This demonstrates the large demand for our parks, particularly our golf courses. And for example, our revenues this September, just this last month, despite some smoky days later in the month, it beat last September by nearly $100,000.
Wow.
So the golf fund is looking great, and we can see that when we compare our expenditures to revenues. And our year-to-date revenues have exceeded year-to-date expenditures by almost $1.6 million. Again, this puts the golf fund in a great financial position moving forward as the season tapers off and we head into the winter months where we have those fixed costs but little or no operating revenue. And we're actually looking forward to a great October, too. I should mention that our facility reserve is at a healthy $967,000, but we do have a SIP loan payment coming due in December. Any questions about the golf fund? Okay, last slide here. We look at the bond fund as at the end of September. Again, we see our expended, committed, or combined expended and committed about $68 million, with leaving a balance of about $621,000. Again, we're winding down, and that's the state of the bond fund at the end of the third quarter. Any questions or concerns? That completes the financial report.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Well done. All right, now Dan Bueller with Garrett Jones gets a chance to speak his piece.
Yeah, I just want to introduce Dan Bueller today, our city engineer, and thank him for taking the time. And just to give a little background as well, again, appreciate all the public comment here today, and that's what it's all about. And in working with utilities and anytime we partner, it's all about public comment, it's all about public questions, concerns, and that's what we're here to listen. And because what we want to do is make the best decision moving forward involving, the park board, the city council, the citizens and staff. So there's no easy answer to any of this. I mean, of course, nobody wants a water tank anywhere. It's not the best amenity. But when engineering, of course, we're great partners. When they reached out, us as staff, we said, sure, take a look, but make sure there's public comment, there's public staff, there's public involved in the process and park board, because we want everyone to be involved and provide what the impacts may be. So with that, just want to introduce Dan, and we'll really kind of focus on, I guess, all of the areas that were looked at, what are the impacts, pros and cons, and then maybe next steps.
Good evening. I'm Dan Bueller, City of Spokane Engineering Department. I'm going to share my screen here.
Hello. Hello, this is Julie calling from Parents for Safe Schools. To let you know, you will be receiving
We got some people that maybe need to do a little bit of muting.
Reject Referendum 90. R90 is the radical new sex ed curriculum starting in kindergarten. School districts and
All right. Hopefully my screen is up now. Garrett or somebody, can you confirm?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, good deal. Okay, this is a presentation that we've given a couple of times now. We've changed it each time a little bit to address questions that have come up in the prior presentation. I believe some of you folks from the Parks Board have seen this. Certainly some of the members of the public have seen it, as my name was used there a few times. I hope I'll be able to demonstrate that the proposed tank with its relatively small footprint on the edge of the park won't destroy the park, but to the contrary, will bring a substantial sum of money to the table, which the Parks Department can use at its discretion to either upgrade this park or upgrade another area in the park, or buy other parkland or conservation space. But I'll let you be the judge as to whether I succeed in that. And we'll talk some of the questions about fencing, about other buildings, about blasting, about 31st and Napa, and hopefully I'll get to all of those. And if you want me to I'll have some answer time at the end. I'm going to go through this. Garrett asked me to keep this to about 20 minutes, so I'm going to go fairly fast. I have 40 slides. I can do a more lengthy version to a couple people, to you individually, to at a later date to a smaller group. I can focus on whatever you want. I'm going to spend less time talking about the justification for the tank. The Washington State Department of Health has mandated this tank. It's been determined by the Spokane City Staff Engineering that it's needed. I'm going to spend not as much time. I'm going to spend more time talking about the sites that have been considered and why we're proposing this tank site. So with that in mind, here we go. Here we go, if I can get this to advance. There. Okay, so a new reservoir is needed. Like I said, fire flow and peak demand in the hot part of the summer, just like a freeway is a need for a freeway. The number of lanes is dictated by peak hour traffic, by rush hour traffic. A water system is its needs are largely determined by what happens in June, July, August, and maybe a little bit of September. The South Hill water system is operating at maximum capacity during the July and August months, just beyond the standards for adequate fire flow as determined by the Washington State Department of Health. This tank serves by gravity folks that are in the vicinity of 14th to about 29th. It serves by pumping from everybody on the South Hill all the way to the edge of the water system at about 65th Avenue. So basically everybody from 14th to 65th, if you're connected to city water, you are affected by this tank. The pressure zone, there are two other tanks in this pressure zone, 33rd and Lamont near Sacagawea, and Garden Park, which is just north of 37th Avenue. Really quickly, water system basics. Every 150 feet or so, there's a new pressure zone, and you're pumping from downtown. The wells out by Phelps Field pump to the next set of reservoirs. From those reservoirs, there's a booster station or two or three booster stations in a given pressure zone. It pumps up to the mid-South Hill. Then there's more booster stations, and it pumps up to the next pressure zone all the way up to the top of Browns Mountain. I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about that. Be happy to talk to anybody about water system basics if you wanted to give me a call, and I'll be happy to take you through it. Given that we have the need, as determined by the engineers, as approved by in a water system plan, which is approved by City Council and then approved by the Washington State Department of Health, and the water system, the need for a new reservoir was identified about 10 years ago. Why are we just acting after 10 years? The answer to that question is government does not move quickly. There are funding to be acquired. There's site selection. There's evaluation of funding and site selection is basically what it is, and just getting it into the capital program. As you can imagine, in a water system that serves a couple 100,000 people, there are a wide variety of needs, all of which need to happen, all of which can't happen in a certain year. So it gets plugged into the program. Eventually, it rises to the top of the list, and then we're where we are today. So location selection, as we go through a tank, a water tank is never a popular option. Unlike a trail, for example, Centennial Trail, where we're filling gaps. We've got one later this year. Actually, it'll get rolled into next year. Centennial Trail, fill in some gaps in that. That's popular. It's unpopular with some people, but by and large, you get to use a trail, and most people are happy about having a trail. Nobody really likes a water tank. We don't like a water tank. It's a 100-foot high eyesore, and no matter where it is, it's somebody doesn't like it, and usually lots of people don't like it. So it's one of the least desirable things that we work on. But nevertheless, we all want to drink water. We all want there to be water to water our lawns, and we all want there to be fire flow when the need rises. So location selection consists of the following 6, and there's actually 7 criteria. In the first criteria, vacant land, we need an absolute minimum of 1 acre, and in reality, it needs to be closer to 2 acres. And ideally on city-owned property, that's kind of a 1A and 1B. Close to transmission mains. Transmission mains are the giant water mains that are 24, 30, 36-inch diameter. They're not the mains that are in most of our front streets, which are 8 inches, which are serving us. It's the mains that connect to the booster stations to the reservoirs, because a reservoir has to be connected to another transmission main, so they're really expensive to connect to anything, so you want to be as close as you can. Needs to be near the center of the pressure zone. I'll have an exhibit up for that here in just a second. It needs to be at an elevation of approximately 2380 or higher to keep the reservoir 100 feet or less. Once you get above 100 feet, the price starts escalating rapidly, number one, and then, of course, just the higher you have the tank, the more visible it is. The site needs to be relatively flat, and then we want to maximize the distance from adjacent homes. That's a key criteria that we'll talk about here in a second as we go through the individual sites, because many of the sites that we have puts the tank immediately in someone's backyard, whereas the Hamblin Park pushes to the tank not right in someone's backyard. It's a couple, 300 feet away from the nearest home. None of these criteria, other than the vacant land being at least an acre and ideally closer to 2 acres, none of these are absolutes. This is not a black and white yes or no endeavor, except for the vacant land. I mean, we can't build a tank on an occupied piece of property or a half an acre piece of property, but all of these are shades of gray. The further you are from transmission mains or the closer you are to adjacent homes, they're all just negatives that add up, but no one, except for the vacant land, getting a no on one of these 6 criteria doesn't automatically kill the site, but as you get more and more no's, it becomes less and less feasible. So let's keep moving. The pressure zone, pressure zone is just the area served by gravity by this proposed tank and the 33rd and Lamont and the Garden Park, which is the one on 37th, is shown in purple there. You can see that it's about 14th on the left-hand side. It's south of 14th. It's about south of 17th on the east side, and it goes to about 33rd on the west side to about 37th on the east side. But as I mentioned at the beginning, water from this pressure zone, from these tanks, 33rd Lamont, the proposed tank, wherever it is, and Garden Park, will be pumped and serve every place south of 17th Avenue. So I had the 6 criteria on a preceding slide, and I've got a couple dashed lines. So let's just start picking apart the criteria. Near the center of the pressure zone, you can see the red dashed line. The reason for the need to be near the pressure zone is the farther the water travels, the more pressure you lose, meaning that people at the far east or the far west end will have lower pressure if the tank is located far to the west or far to the east. Close to the transmission main. The transmission mains are shown in the blue lines there. There's 2 booster stations that serve this zone. One is on Ray Street at about 20th. One is at 14th and Grand. So we need to be somewhere in the vicinity of those blue lines. And so I've drawn a green rectangle around an area that would be within 5 or 6 blocks of the transmission mains. Again, the transmission mains are the 24, 30, 36-inch diameter mains that connect booster stations to reservoirs. Okay. Next one, we need to be above about 2380. That's, again, not a hard, fast line. If we were at 2370, that would be more expensive, but it's not a hard and fast line. It's a general guideline, and generally 29th Avenue to the south, as indicated by the red arrows pointing to the bottom of the screen, is where we get to elevation of about 2380. When we combine these 3 categories, the green dashed line, the red dashed line, and the red arrows, we get an area bounded by the green line there, which meets all 3 of those criteria. And that area is roughly, again, it's not exact, a block or 2, one direction or the other would not be the end of the world, but that's bounded by roughly 29th Avenue, Arthur, Thurston, and Cook Street. So this is that same area blown up, 29th Avenue on the top, Thurston Avenue on the bottom, Arthur on the left, Cook on the right. Same exhibit from the previous screen. And then it's not a terribly complicated evaluation. We go within this circle and look where are the areas that have vacant land that are at least an acre and ideally closer to 2 acres. And here they are. We've got Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Church just east of the public library on Perry Street, 31st and Napa, which was referenced by a number of people in the public comment section of this meeting, which I'll talk about at length here in a moment. Southeast Boulevard over there to the southwest of the old Hastings, Hamblin Park, Garden Park Tank, and Hamblin Elementary. So I'd like to talk about those. Plus, I've got about 4 or 5 other sites I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about them one by one. The alternatives shown here meet the first 3 criteria: close to an existing transmission main, near to the center of the pressure zone, at or above 2380. So, in other words, if you're in the green zone here, you've met the first 3 criteria. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about the first 3 criteria. One by one. Our Lady of Fatima. Once again, it meets the first 3 criteria. It is barely 1 acre. It is relatively flat. It is not city-owned, but the city can acquire property. It is immediately adjacent to existing homes. And then other considerations that don't fit into those criteria is a tank would be a huge impact to a 1-acre site. It's a school site, so it would be a big impact to the playground that the kids are playing on. And there's no guarantee that it could be acquired, that we could purchase it from a property owner that had only 1 acre. We don't believe that is the best site for those reasons. Not only do we not believe it's the best site, we don't believe it's a good site at all. Next site, Southeast Boulevard. This was has been a popular site with the online survey we have going right now. Once again, it meets the first 3 criteria. It is at least 1 acre. It's actually closer to about 3 acres. Not relatively flat, not city-owned, not distant from nearby homes. Since we had our presentation on the 22nd, our most recent public presentation on the 22nd of September, we have found that land is in platting process right now. It is in development. It is not for sale. There are plans to turn it into residential single family. And so I won't spend any more time on that. It did have some advantages, though, but again, it's not for sale. Next one, 31st and Napa. This one was indeed our previous selected site. Meets the first three criteria because it's within the green boundary there. It is barely an acre. Not flat at all. It is city-owned. As someone pointed out, the city acquired this property, and if we don't use it, we will sell the property and more than recoup the costs that we spent on that. It is immediately adjacent to the condos that are just to the north on 31st Avenue, as you can probably see here, and those residents were vehement objectors to this tank. I guess I should point out that no matter where we put this tank, we are going to have a large group, relatively large group of objectors because nobody wants a 100-foot tank in their backyard. And that proved, since we got a little ways on the 31st and Napa, that proved to be the case there. So why did we change from that site? We had initially, the folks who upstream of my design group, which is the planning group, had evaluated seriously of 31st and Napa, Hamlin Park, and Garden Park, which we'll talk about in a minute, had decided on 31st and Napa as being the having it's perched on a rock knob that is ideal if you could fly in a tank. The rock knob is about 70 feet wide and about 100 feet long, which is larger than the footprint of the tank, as we'll talk about here in a moment. As often happened, and so we moved ahead with permitting, and I did much of the permitting, and you heard my name quoted there a number of times. We moved ahead with permitting, believing that this was the best site, and we approached this concurrently as we start design. We concurrently start permitting as a general rule because public works projects like this are a lengthy processes, and we need to do things consecutively, not sequentially. But as occasionally happens, and I don't want to say often, but as sometimes happens, as we get into the design, we discover things that make us think, this may not be the best option for any given project. And in this case, it was a serious constructability issue. We would have, to construct the tank at this location, we would have been removing 20 to 25 feet height of solid rock, which was not at all, and that came from bringing the tank folks to town to look at the constructability, and the folks who would actually construct the tank. We do one of these every 6-7 years, so we brought in out-of-town experts to help with that evaluation, and they said that this tank is all but unconstructible, and it would have huge impacts on neighboring when we go and basically shave off a hillside 20-25 feet worth of rock, and the dollars just started adding up. Our site that we have there, which is this sort of maybe gun-shaped L, is not big enough. We would need to acquire more property. There was a implication that perhaps I work for Greenstone, or maybe I have some friends who work from Greenstone, don't know anybody at Greenstone, don't know anything about Greenstone. Greenstone hasn't talked to us about this site. We don't know in Greenstone anything. They don't know us anything. It's just simply a tank site that has substantial disadvantages that with substantial additional costs that would severely impact a whole bunch of neighbors who are within 50 feet of the proposed reservoir. So at that point, we decided to step back and consider other alternatives, not just the 3 that were initially considered, but 11 total, all of which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. We've now talked about 3 or 4 of them. Step back and consider other alternatives and see whether there are better alternatives, which we believe there are, given the substantial disadvantages of 31st and Napa. Going to move on here. Oh, so one other thing about 31st and Napa. Again, it's not uncommon to go down a road, admit to yourself that wasn't the best alternative, and before you throw good money after bad, step back and go in a different direction. I don't apologize for that. In fact, I think that's a testimony of a properly functioning system. And again, the city will lose no money on the sale of that property. The city will probably make money on that given the real estate market at present. Next site was Garden Park Tank. Once again, meets the first three categories because we're within the green. There is not vacant land of 1 acre, let alone the closer to 2 acres that we really need. It is not relatively flat. We can work around that. It is city-owned. It is immediately adjacent to existing homes. It's been pointed out in some of the comments that we've received via email that, hey, there's one tank already, so one more tank isn't going to make any difference to those neighbors. I think the existing neighbors would beg to differ with that characterization. Again, nobody is going to want this tank next to them, no matter where we are. But frankly, this site is not feasible. I'm gonna zoom in here a little bit. If we put the tank here, we've got roughly 100 by 300, which is about 2/3 of an acre. There's just simply not room to build a tank when we're hemmed in on this side, we're hemmed in on this side, and we're hemmed in over here. Moving on, Hamblin Elementary School. This turned out to be actually the least popular in our online survey, even less popular than the Hamblin Park site by far, actually. While it meets all criteria except for being city-owned, it would have less of an impact than the school at Our Lady of Fatima, but it would have an impact to the playground at Hamblin, which isn't huge. We believed we could work around that and make that work. The school district, though, the property owner, was not supportive of that idea. And again, this was by far the least popular site that we have on our online survey. So we stepped back and looked broader. Let's not limit it to the green area. Let's go outside the green area. And the first site that we looked at and has been suggested by a number of people at our prior meetings was Ferris High School. It is relatively flat rather. Unfortunately, it's fairly far from the nearest transmission main. It's about 3,500 additional feet. Transmission mains run about $500 a running foot. It's also a 30-foot lower, which results in a 130-foot tank instead of a 100-foot tank. And believe it or not, while you think of Ferris High School as being wide open, it actually has minimal land. We talked to the school district about it, and they said maybe possibly just beyond the outfield of the baseball diamond that borders Regal Street, where that's a square, and the baseball the baseball outfield is of course a circle. But they said we're not wild about that idea. There's not really room because we're using every bit of it, but I guess more to the point, it adds at least 50% to the project cost. So we kept looking, though. Hazels Creek is the natural area that's directly south of the relatively new football field at Hamblin Park. It is city-owned. It's relatively flat, and there's plenty of area there. Unfortunately, it's even further from the nearest transmission main. And by the way, you may hear from citizens that there's transmission mains in Regal Street, which, again, transmission main is the 24, 30, 36-inch mains that connect the booster stations to the reservoirs. And there absolutely is a transmission main in Ferris Street. It is not the same pressure zone. It serves a completely different area. It's much higher pressure. It is technically infeasible to use the transmission main in Regal Street, if you hear that. So, anyways, back to Hazels Creek. It is even further from the transmission main. It's about 4,000 feet. It's even lower. It's about 50 feet lower than the Hamlin Park site. Not near the center of the pressure zone, and it's actually close to double the cost. I didn't want to overstate the case, so I left it at it's at least 50% of the added to the project cost. But we kept looking. It was suggested by many, and frankly, it's an obvious one. What about the South Complex, the KXLY site, the site that's immediately west of McDonald's on Regal Street? That's a fairly wide site. It goes all the way from Regal, as you know, all the way to Altamont Street on the west side. It's city-owned. It's relatively flat, and there's plenty of areas if you could tuck it between the soccer fields. Unfortunately, it also is very far from transmission main, 5,000 additional feet. That's about a mile. Again, about $500 a running foot for transmission mains. It's about 40 feet lower, which is 140-foot tank, not near the center of the pressure zone. And again, conservatively, it adds 50% to the project cost. It's pushing double the project cost there. But we kept going. Thornton Murphy Park on the corner of 27th Avenue, roughly, and Ray Street by the South Side Senior Center, city-owned, relatively flat, fair amount of area. It's not terribly well-used park. It's 100 feet lower than Hamlin Park, which makes for a 200-foot tank. That's technically not feasible. There aren't more than a handful in the entire nation that are that high. That the cost would be astronomical. It would be approaching triple the cost if it was even technically feasible, which I don't believe it is. But we kept looking. Lincoln Park has Southeast Boulevard at about maybe 20th. It's city-owned. It's relatively flat, plenty of area. It would likely have some of the same opposition that Hamlin Park would have. In other words, keep your reservoirs out of our park. It's not vacant area. And by the way, we don't consider Lincoln Park or Hamlin Park to be vacant area. We very much know and consider them to be a park. But if for some reason it was considered less objectionable by the public than Hamlin Park, it has the same problems that some of these other ones outside the green areas, which is we're 4,000 additional feet from transmission mains, and so we're about 50% higher cost due to that $500 cost, $500 running foot. Which brings us, so that's 10 sites right there, which I've just talked about, which brings us to site number 11, which is Hamlin Park. It meets all of the criteria. It's the only site that meets all of the criteria. And so when we went through this evaluation, after stepping back from the 31st and Napa site, we evaluated all these criteria and we said the site has some significant advantages that it has to at least be considered in more detail than was considered before it was dismissed in the prior evaluation. So let's talk about Hamlin Park here a little bit. Actually, so there's a question of, parks in, tanks in parks. Is it done? The answer is there are not a lot of examples in Spokane. There are examples in others. Millwoods has a tank right in their park just east of City Hall, south of the railroad tracks, east of Argonne there. More importantly is what happens in Spokane. This is Shadle Tank within a park. Walmart is to the right there. Shadle Park High School is Walmart is to the left. Shadle Park High School is to the right. The library is just to the north of that park space right around it. Not directly analogous, I realize, but nevertheless it is a tank in a park. Another tank in a park-like area, but not a park, is going up 5 Mile Hill about halfway. 5 Mile Road is on the left side of the screen, just off the left side of the screen. At Woodside, is this water department-owned property, which is not a park, but it functions in much the same way as Hamblin Park does, in that there are trails, there are people walking their dogs, there are people, there are wildflowers, there are pine trees, there are much of the same features that exist in Hamblin Park are in this area. And as you see, there's a substantially bigger tank than what we would be talking about that is at the edge of this park-like area, in much the same way that we propose the tank in Hamlin Park, which would be on the edge. Our footprint would be dramatically smaller than this. This park-like area, not a park, this park-like area continues to be used with this tank there as we submit Hamlin Park would continue to be used as a park if the tank were sited there. Reservoir dimensions, about 100 feet tall, about 2 million gallons capacity. Here's an important point. The footprint at the base is 50 to 60 feet in diameter. And then the tank itself is 100 feet. That's up in the air. That 50 or 60 foot diameter represents less than 1/10 of 1 acre. Meaning that the footprint impact is less than 1% of the entire park area. So I submit to you that the impacts of this tank would not destroy the park. It would be noticed, but it would not destroy the park when the footprint takes 1% of the area. It's actually less than 1%. So here are a couple of possible locations. The one in solid blue was situated there because there's a bit of a clearing there. It could be slid to the south and be on the southern property line. It could frankly be slid to the east or to the west, all the way to Crestline. Could be slid all the way to Napa. The advantage of where we have shown this is the white area, by the way, the white dashed is a construction impact area, about 225 by about 225, which is roughly 12% of the total park. In that area, much of the vegetation would be disturbed. Not all of it, but much of the vegetation would be disturbed. But one of the significant advantages of Hamblin Park is, unlike any other site we've talked about, we would have a 200-foot undisturbed buffered area from the nearest homes, and a 325-foot buffer from the tank itself to the nearest home. There is no other site that offers that offers that advantage. Every other site puts the tank in someone's backyard. So basically, by proposing a park site, we impact more people less, as opposed to one of the other sites where we impact less people, but we impact them more. So what does the tank look like? For the people who looked at it directly from Crestline or directly from Napa, the top of the tank would not actually be visible. And in the center of your screen, you see the first house there on Napa Street and 39th. The same could be said at Crestline Street and 39th. The tank does not poke up over the top of the trees for those folks. You have to go mid-block back to the west or to the east to be able to see the top of the tank. Would you be able to see the tank through the trees? You would. But there would be a fair amount of screening, and I have another picture of that here coming up in just a moment. This is a simulated picture. I have a real picture here in a minute of what you would see if you were right on Napa or right on Crestline. It's a simulated picture of what you would see back a half a block west or east of the tank site. The tank sites I mentioned here, the tank types being considered, the three main types, hydropillar, water spheroid, and standpipe. I mentioned a moment ago that the footprint is 50 or 60 feet at the base and 100 feet in the air. That assumes either a hydropillar or a water spheroid. And what that looks in real life. This one, I just happened to be coming back from Silverwood with my kids this summer, drove by this and took a picture. As you can see, there's all of 4 trees screening this tank from surrounding areas, which would not at all be the case at Hamblin Park. I want to go back to, this is Garden Park, just to give you the idea. The next picture I'm going to show you is what Garden Park looks like, the existing Garden Park tank, never mind the proposed. As I mentioned here a few minutes ago, this site is too small. But if you took a picture where the red X is in your upper right-hand corner, there's about 75 feet worth of treed buffer between where the red X is and that tank. And again, from a few slides ago, we would have a 200-foot treed buffer. And what that looks like is that. So yes, is the tank visible through the tree buffer? It is. Is it in your face? I would argue it is not. And this is, again, with a 75 to 80-foot treed buffer. Some concluding thoughts, and then I'll stop talking and take question or answers, or you guys can move on. The tank is an improvement the city has to make. If you live anywhere south of 14th, you benefit. Every location presented tonight is going to be controversial. I've talked about that a number of times. It has to be located in the vicinity of Hamblin Park, so it's going to be visible from Hamblin Park area, no matter which of these locations we pick. Talked about how Hamblin location doesn't disproportionately impact some neighbors because it's a block away from the nearest home. Talked about how it impacts less than 1% of the park area over the long term. And then probably the most important point that I haven't really spent any time talking about, it's the only site that comes with that we don't spend the money and send it to an out-of-state contractor. Any other site, the tank will spend multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars more, and in some cases $1 million or more, a couple million or more. This site, really, I think the choice for the Parks Board is there are some impacts to the park. We would argue that they are modest in that it's a 1% impact area long term, 12% over the construction season, but 1% in the long term. But it comes with a substantial amount of money to be spent at the Parks Department discretion. Other parks in this area, at this park, acquiring other parks land. That's for you to decide if you decide that this is an appropriate site and an appropriate trade-off. Last slide I have is our next steps. We've held a number of community meetings now with a couple different neighborhoods, and including so three public meetings thus far. Right now we're in the fourth item there. The third item, evaluate and incorporate community input and survey results in the fall. We have a survey open right now for another week. It's been open for 2 weeks. You all have heard comments because they've been forwarded to me. We have our own comment line that we've heard things from. And the next item in terms of my process, engineering process, is select the tank site and begin the permitting. In terms of your process, I defer to Nick and Garrett. To determine what your next process is. That is the end of my presentation. I'm going to land on this slide and then stop talking and let anybody who wants to ask questions ask questions.
Thank you, Daniel. That was a very complete presentation. Don't worry about time. I'm not going to have a president's report today. I'll give that time up.
Can I say one other thing that I forgot to? I just looked down at my comments. There was a question during the public comment time at the beginning whether there would be fencing or auxiliary buildings. The answer is, given the setting, no. If we go to one of the other sites, the answer is probably yes. But given the setting and given the need to minimize the footprint, the answer is Absolutely not. And one other thing that I would like to add, we don't in any way, I heard it said a couple of times that we've presented this or we view this as a foregone conclusion. We don't in any way think that this is a foregone conclusion that the park that the tank is going to be to land here. We hope that it does for the sake of both the park system and for the overall citizens of Spokane and the water system, but don't view that as a foregone conclusion.
Okay. So, Daniel, I noticed that when you were looking outside the main zone, most of the sites you were looking at were east. What about moving west?
With the tank?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can we could move this. We could move this direct. We can move this north, south, east, or west. In terms of shortening the tank, the ground gets higher as we move to the east. So if we were to move to the east, the tank could potentially be 90 or even 80 feet. It's not 80, probably 90 feet, because I don't think it rises more than about 10 feet. But we could also move it to the west. It falls away there, so the tank would grow in height, maybe 5 or 10 maximum. There's not 10 feet of fall. But yes, we could move it any direction.
And then my second question was, have you considered looking at corporate partners who might be willing to either donate or for that $200,000 you were talking about for parks, give a piece of their parking lot, for example? I think about how Shopko never had his parking lot full. Certainly behind Hastings, there's some park and ride. When it's in that kind of a commercial setting, a tank doesn't seem to be as incongruous as it does in the middle of a ponderosa forest. So are there commercial sites nearby that there or a partnership could be developed between an entity, a business entity, and the city?
If we believe we've looked at every vacant site within the area on your screen, as well as a half a dozen sites that were broad and were outside the green area, and I'm unaware of a vacant area that is at least an acre that's anywhere within this vicinity. Shopko, for example, has some of the same limitations. Or the area between Ferris High School and Shopko on the east side of Regal has the same limitations as Ferris High School does, which is it's 3/4 of a mile away. It's from the nearest transmission mains. It's 30 feet lower, so we're looking at adding 50% to the project cost.
Park board members, other questions? Park board members, do you have other questions? Can you hear me?
No, Jennifer Jerry.
Uh-huh.
I just would like to make a comment that I did spend time up at the park today, so that I would have a little bit better idea of what we're looking at. And I really encourage every park board member, if you don't know where this particular land is, that you take time to go revisit it. And then just another thank you for the citizens for their time and energy spent. And then also, Dan, for your excellent presentation. Thank you.
Others? Barb, Greta, Bob, Nick? Any questions? No? Sally? Okay. Well, again, we were not going to vote on this today, so something to think about. At this point, Daniel, are you looking for some sort of an indication from Park Board, a permission or not permission to move forward, or are you just going to wait until this becomes an action item?
At this, thank you for asking that. We've got another week of having the survey open, so I think it's premature to ask for anything. We need to let the comment period play itself out, and then take those comments and evaluate them and give you the results, and frankly show the results to City Council as well, because they ultimately approve the construction contract that would come out of this tank wherever it is. So I guess I don't have any requests for anybody to do anything at this time, but I would anticipate getting back with you in probably 2 weeks maximum.
All right. Well, of course, our next park board meeting is November.
Jennifer, I do have one question.
Yes.
Daniel, you mentioned that it would add sometimes 50% to the cost of the project. You're throwing percentages out, and that's fine, but what does that equate to in real dollars? I have no idea what the cost of the project would be. Anyway, if you can help.
Sure. The tank cost is in the mid $4 million range. So 50% is in the low $2 million range.
Thank you.
Okay. So I did have one comment that parks would need to see a fairly sizable contribution, according to one of our members, toward parks if this were to go forward. So anyway, we have lots to discuss. But again, Daniel, our next meeting will not be until next month. So.
Okay, I think then we'll plan on getting you something by, so not 2 weeks. In other words, more like 4 weeks.
Right. So, thank you. Of course, we have the option of a land committee meeting. I suppose with COVID, things have been streamlined, and most of our subcommittees are actually going through finance. But we will stay in touch with you, and we'll move on. Thank you again for your presentation and all your time.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we will move into our committee reports. I realize that it's 5:06, but a lot of our committees were canceled. Urban Forestry was canceled. Rick is not here today. Jerry Sperling did have golf.
Oh, hi, Jennifer, and board and guests. Just talking about golf a little bit, and you heard a great report from Mark, so that we already know that golf is alive and well and moving forward into the fall right now. Just another quick thank you to the Park Board for approving our purchase for equipment, and that is all being delivered as we speak, and most of it finishing up before the end of the month. So, kudos for everybody supporting that. As you heard, the other reports, one real quick one, and that's on irrigation, of course, as long as we're talking about water. And Esmeralda is finishing up, final touches. The system now is set up with the coaxial, with the cable, so that we can do training. So everyone will have an idea of how this system will really provide and function for us. And the very last thing will be fencing on our pump, because that provides us some protection and away from vandalism, and that we very much need that. So with that, just also like to let you know that the game is growing, and we this year not only work with adults and older adults, but we had the youngest group in the 5 to 7-year-old range. So they were the birdie ball tee group, and it was phenomenal and exciting to watch it. So with that, we are going to be having our next golf meeting in November on the 10th, and probably by WebEx at 8 o'clock in the morning. So thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, golf is a rock star right now, that's for sure.
You bet.
Let's see, Land Committee did not meet, but Greta, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I have nothing to say except that the next Land Committee meeting is scheduled for 3:30 p.m. on November 4th, 2020 via WebEx.
Okay.
Similarly, I won't have a report for Conservation Futures today.
That makes that efficient. Thank you. Recreation Committee did not meet, and I don't see Sally on the call anymore. She may have had to leave. Oh, good. You are there. Your phone number. Okay.
Well, camera's not working.
Okay.
So, no, I don't have anything to report, and we did not meet. Thank you.
Okay. And then Nick, Riverfront Park Committee had 2 consent items. Would you like to add anything?
John did a report on the urban zip line, and I was going to have him kind of do a brief overview of that.
That's right. It was an exciting report.
Yes.
Go ahead.
John,
take it away if you can hear me.
Let me share my screen, and I will go with through a quick presentation. I promise it will be quick, so I will go over it really fast as I can. All right. Let's see. All right. Are you able to see my notes page or this display page?
Well, we can see notes. They're a little small on my screen, but maybe that's just my problem.
All right.
Stephen, John, we just have, everything kind of condensed.
Okay. Can you see the front page, or do you see my notes? I'm not sure what you see.
Notes view.
Oh, you are. Okay, thank you. So let me swap those screens again. I have 3 screens I'm trying to manage here, so thank you for your patience. All right. So what I wanted to talk first about, and first and foremost, is that I'm here today to bring information to the park board that we are starting a preliminary assessment to assess the feasibility of a potential zip line from the CSO tank 26 down to Red Band Park. It is not a foregone conclusion by any means, and I fully acknowledge up front that we need to do a robust public outreach process. So I'm still hearing that you're seeing my notes, so that's all right. Let's see if this. I have 3 screens and it's not doing what I needed to do. Let's try this again. Oh. This is just not working today. I apologize. This is we have 3 screens here. I'm not sure how to get this to show on the right screen. Now you just see a blank screen, right? A blue screen.
Yes.
All right. You know what? I'm not going to be able to show you the presentation. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to walk you through it verbally, and just unfortunately I had some really good slides to show you. But I want to first say what an urban zip line is and how that is different from other zip lines. So an urban zip line is a destination attraction. So it is unlike other zip line tours, which have a series of connecting zip lines that make it. So this is a single ride attraction in the heart of downtown, which makes it an exciting destination attraction. To kind of give a little bit of history about this, in 2014, the Riverfront Park Master Plan Advisory Committee recommended the park to explore a privately run destination ride. At the time, they envisioned this on the North Bank. It would be such as a Ferris wheel or a viewing tower, but the idea of zipline also came out at this time. But the North Bank today has a regional playground and it has a sportsplex. Both were also items identified in the master plan. And so the idea has been with us since 2014, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the time. In 2016, Mark Richard from the Downtown Spokane Partnership proposed a zip line once again over Riverfront Park. He was also on the advisory committee. He reintroduced the idea in an Inlander article. In 2018, with the construction of the CSO tank in process, Kyle Tuig and Rick Romero conducted a feasibility study to assess whether it was possible to attach a zip line from the CSO tank down to Red Band Park. And they implemented a couple studies, and the pictures that I have do show some of those zip lines, some of those pictures. So also in 2018, Kyle, Gavin, and Rick approached council and gave them an update on this plan. I'm hearing now that council was not particularly warm to the idea. I did not know that at the time. And Kyle had informed me that they recommended that they possibly explore a private-public partnership. So I'm back here today with the construction of the CSO tank to kind of paint a picture of what a possible plan would be to bring a zip line to the park area. So the zip line itself is proposed to fly from the plaza of CSO 26, the east end of the plaza. It would have a platform. It would have two parallel zip lines, and it would fly approximately 1,400 feet, about a quarter of a mile to Red Band Park. Current siting of the landing zone of Red Band Park is in the service access road area of the park. It's a highly disturbed portion of the park, and it was sited in this location because it was deemed to be less disruptive to the cultural sensitivities of Red Band Park. And so that's kind of the working footprint of this location. And we're still meeting with all the stakeholders to really identify all the challenges that we still have to overcome with this plan. The zip line itself would require engineering expertise in geology, foundation, structures, operations, and maintenance of systems to really make sure that is constructed professionally and commercial grade. So the zip lines itself would be essentially sited on this location, not across the river between Monroe Street Bridge or Division Street Bridge, because crossing that zone across the river anywhere would be in violation of the FERC boundary, which is a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission zone, and Avista manages that license. So what we're doing, Avista actually proposed this current location as being compliant with FERC, and we'll be reaching out to them again to confirm that the location is still a valid one. So what we know about zip lines is pretty much everyone can use a zip line, and it's going to be mostly able to support most of those with disabilities. And it can handle anyone from a youth to a senior. All right. So one of the reasons why we want to do this is one, it's stated in the master plan. And so as my role at Riverfront Parks Director is to continue to build out of the master plan and really look to activate that vision identified in the advisory committee. It also increases activation of the park and the surrounding areas. And then it's also considered to help us offset the cost of maintenance in the parks. So right now, you may not be aware, but Riverfront Parks maintenance team provides through a service agreement with engineering services, grounds maintenance on the plaza surface. So we hope to use the proceeds from any particular zip lines to offset the cost of that operation. Additionally, we think it has a lot of benefit for the downtown community itself. We see it really encouraging and promoting Spokane as a better destination attraction, really giving Visit Spokane another anchor destination to draw tourism and promote conferences, helps our downtown businesses and restaurants, and really just activates our tourism and our hospitality industry, which right now is struggling with the COVID-19. So those are some other solutions, other reasons. All right, really quick, the industry is regulated by an organization called the Association for Challenge Course Technology, or ACCT, and they set all the standards, policies, and procedures for zip lines. So any partner that came in to build and operate this zip line would have to conform to these standards. ACCT is also an ANSI accredited standards developer. And so they actually certify instructors and inspectors to operate zip lines. They would have to conform to these requirements. What else? There is no federal regulatory body when it comes to regulation of zip lines. The regulation is handled at the state level with the Washington Department of Labor and Industries, the amusement park division. This is the same division that handles sky rides and our sky ride and our carousel. But these particular inspectors would have to be ACC certified inspectors. There's also a lot of safety equipment that's involved and maintenance involved in zip lines. Of course, riders, if you've been on a zip line before, you're wearing a helmet, a harness, gloves. And then also there's daily and monthly and annual inspections of the zip line itself. Then all procedures and communication requirements are independently reviewed by a third-party ACCT operator to ensure that they conform to standards. There's a lot of questions about industry safety when it comes to zip lines, and one of the most important questions is it safe? And there is a lot of statistics here, and I will tell you that what we're seeing is that the reports show that commercially operated zip lines, ones that conform and are engineered by the standards that I've stated, are in fact safe. But the statistics that I'm going to share with you here are disproportional because they include background, do-it-yourself, backyard zip lines, and unaccredited zip lines in the statistics. So, for example, what we see here is in a study that was done by the American Journal of Emergency Medicine in 2015, they reported that 11.64 injuries per million population. Now, to kind of put that in context, amusement rides in general are less than one. So that's really big. And 12% of those are resulting in hospitalization. So about 1.39 million injuries. These are big numbers, but most experts agree that these numbers misrepresent the safety of the zip lines because they're all mixed in together. In general, as we go approach a private-public partnership, we will be requiring staunch safety requirements. But we're approaching this through a private-public partnership as a destination because of several reasons. One, a private partner would provide the capital, the design, and they would actually operate and build the zip line. It would not be at city cost. They would carry the license and they would be insured. They would essentially indemnify the city from risk. We're also going to ask the partner to provide free tickets to charitable organizations, low income and underserved youth in our community. And we think there's a great opportunity to tell the Spokane story through tours and interpretive signage. So because we land in Red Band Park, we feel that it's important to tell the story of Red Band Park and also tell the other historical stories about the area. One thing we're asking from the city here would be a minimum 10-year contract. This is required for the partner to recover their cost of investment. The city would provide the land for that period of time. They would do a revenue share. We estimate about $40,000 to $65,000 annually but that would vary depending on how we negotiate the tickets and other requirements with the provider. We see opportunities to integrate the provider's operation with Riverfront Parks activities, which help our activation, but also create a more seamless experience for the community using it. All right.
Thank you, John. I've been reminded that the notes and the pictures for this are on the Riverfront Park agendas and minutes, which should be posted online and available to anyone. Anything else, Nick?
Reminder to please read the minutes from the RFP meeting and the standing report, operations report. John presented some really good information and some good numbers and stuff for the summer and for things that are going on. And our next meeting is November 9th at 3 p.m. and most likely online.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry.
Nick, Jennifer, if I can add just one more thing, I think it's an important piece of the process here. And I want to identify that there are a lot of stakeholders in this process, including Park Board, Council, and the public. And there are residents involved that are going to be impacted by this. And we need to do our due diligence and fully vet this project out prior to bringing it back to this leadership and to Council. And so we fully plan to do this. And I very well know that we might go through the next 4 months. We're giving ourselves 4 months to vet this out. And we might come back and say it's just not feasible. But we want to listen to concerns. We want to take your feedback. And if you do have any concerns, questions that I did not address, please let me know so that I can articulate them and resolve any concerns that you may have in the future.
Thank you, John. Bob Anderson, if you would permit me, I'm going to let Councilmember Kinnear go next, given the lateness of the hour.
That's certainly fine by me.
Thank you.
Jennifer, and thank you, Bob. Yes, I've been in WebEx and Zoom meetings since 11 o'clock, so it's been quite the day. And I wanted to comment on Jonathan. Jonathan really presented to Candace, Mom, and I, and we had quite a good conversation about the zip line and the process and our concerns. And he's just such a great listener. I appreciate that. And I'd be glad to send the board the council's concerns because I think it will give you a better sense of what we're looking at and what some of the things that we're saying, you know, we're not sure how to fix this. We're not sure how we can mitigate if you all decide to put a zip line in the spot. So I would be glad to give just write up some notes, give it to Pam and say, please distribute to Parks. It'll give you kind of an idea of how what we're thinking about and what some of our concerns are, if that's okay with you, Jennifer. You received today another draft of Park Board ordinance changes. Is Garrett still on this? I don't see him anymore.
Lori.
Oh, goodness, thank you. Thank you, Garrett. So Garrett and Mary Miramatsu and I have been working diligently listening to folks who have concerns, especially around, you heard someone tonight talk about First Amendment rights, and I guarantee you our legal team in no way would let anything slip through that was going to endanger or impede First Amendment rights. So Mary came up with some changes that would help mitigate that. And you also heard this gentleman concern about homeless. This isn't about homelessness. This is about large groups having impact on our parks and having a plan to clean up it's like kindergarten 101, clean up your mess. And Mary's been great at making changes. I think we're at draft 12 at this point, so you may see other drafts. My ask of the Park Board is to please read these and come back with questions or concerns so we can make changes. This will be before you in November for a vote. It will not go to council before then. It has to pass the Park Board first. So I want to make sure that any of your concerns are addressed before that time, and you have ample time to look at a final draft and feel comfortable either passing it or rejecting it. And then finally, we are in the midst of our budget. Right now, we expect to hopefully pass a budget in December. Right now, we've got about a $10 million gap that we have to fill. So that's going to be a challenge. And Parks has been so prudent about making sure that they're frugal. And we're asking all of the departments to do the same thing. So it's more of a challenge. This is my 12th year in the council office, not as a council member, but in the council office. This is probably the most challenging year I can remember in terms of trying to come up with a balanced budget and find money to make sure that essential services are not cut. So you'll be seeing something around the budget and a final that council will vote on in December. So those are the highlights, and if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Council Member. I reviewed your document and thought it was very common sense, and I too believe that it's not aimed at the homeless, it's aimed at making sure that our parks remain safe and clean and usable for our citizens. So. Okay, there is no President's Report today, no Conservation Futures. Jerry, did you want to say anything about Parks Foundation? Whoops, Bob, I need to get back to you.
Okay, Bob's first.
Yes, let's do Bob.
Why, thank you. I thought you were skipping right past us. The Finance Committee did meet on October 6th, 2020. Garrett has already presented a methodology of the budget. That was our one action item, but we still need to present the numbers involved in that budget. And I don't know if that's going to be Garrett or that's going to be Mark presenting that, but that seems to be the next step, and then we'll discuss that and vote to approve or not. So either Mark or Garrett, take it away from there.
I can present the budget, the high-level budget that is included in your packet. Give me a moment. Okay, can everybody see that? What this is a high-level budget looking up at our major roll-up of our account classes for each of our departments within our division. Kind of building upon what Garrett said, this is a very, very status quo budget. This is very similar. The only difference is between what we presented last month as a preliminary expose, I should say, of the budget, and this particular budget for adoption is there was about $20-some thousand of changes in salaries and benefits, and again, it's compared to the 2020 budget. The 2021 requested budget is, like I said, like I mentioned earlier, is very status quo. The only difference is adjustments in salaries and benefits. There's been some adjustments in interfund services, the amounts that we pay to other city agencies who provide services to parks. Some changes in debt service due to the refinancing of the city's debt obligations, and we made some changes in capital outlay, an increase in capital outlay, a reduction in our budget for grant revenues and expenditures. I probably, just due to time, I don't need to go through each one of these. These are all in your packet. We have natural resources, park operations, Riverfront Park, recreation, our administration budget, but here's our roll-up for the entire Parks Fund. Again, we have the breakout of our primary revenue sources, and also our major expenditure categories. If we compare these to the 2020 adopted, you'll see that the majority of the differences are in salaries and benefits. Supplies stay the same. A little bit of differences in services and charges. We budgeted for some contractual obligations that we did not have budget for. We see a fairly significant increase in interfund services. Some of our operating transfers, you see that's a significant reduction due to our changes in debt service. We do include we have built in some savings for our planned vacancies that we will have next year. That's reflected in reserve for budget adjustments. We see our capital outlay increased somewhat, but however, our grant expenditures have reduced. You notice that grant expenditures and grant revenues will balance. Overall, as Garrett mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're proposing a budget that is out of balance in the sense that the revenues are $316,000 greater than our expenditures, reflecting this budget we feel gives us plenty of flexibility, but also reflects our need to build our fiscal reserves, our financial reserves moving into 2022 and 23. Again, as I mentioned in the financial report regarding our, to give us the reserves for any changes or reductions within the general fund transfer so that we don't have to dramatically reduce services. That way we can keep an even keel, so to speak. Garrett, if you have anything to add, if anybody has anything to add, if there are any questions, we'll take a look at the Gulf Fund. Again, very status quo budget.
Nothing from me, Mark.
I'm sorry, say again?
Nothing from me. You're doing a great job.
Okay, thank you. Here again is our Gulf Fund. Again, very status quo budget, no increases in staffing, some central charge changes in salaries and benefits. We did make a slight change. Because of the anticipated utility or water savings at the parks where we built new irrigation systems, we have anticipated, we have shifted $25,000 from services and charges into our capital outlay. Dramatic reduction in debt service, which is a really good thing, again, resulting from the refinance of our SIP loans. But other than that, again, we're proposing a budget again that has gives us the flexibility to handle primarily, and we'll be maintaining the core service model. We'll be looking at expenditures, what our revenues are every month. Again, I kind of stress that a budget is a roadmap. It's sort of like a checkbook. Again, Garrett mentioned that. I mean, our activities are always really determined by how much cash reserves and how much revenue we have available within our fund. That's really the high points, or if there's any other questions or comments.
Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
So if no other questions or comments on the budget, I will move that we accept the 2021 budget as submitted by Mark tonight. So I will make that motion. Okay, again, any other chances? Then we'll put it up for, it has been moved and seconded. We will put it up for vote. So all those in favor, respond aye.
Aye.
All right, Parks, you have a 2021 budget.
Very much.
I'll briefly go through my narrative. It's something I feel I have to do here anyway, but Garrett Jones presented an excellent narrative describing the 2021 budget process. Park is operated during most of 2020 at the base crew level, and the 2021 budget is established at this benchmark. The base crew level is determined as the staffing needed to maintain core services to the community while protecting our park's assets. Staffing costs for 2021 comprise the majority of the budgeted expenditures, with a total of $12,808,853. That's 55% of our total expenditures. So any request to increment this base crew expenses will be submitted to Garrett and analyzed according to the established guidelines. 2020 has presented unique operating challenges which required review of all the park's activities. Core services were defined and costs to maintain those were established. Additional costs to increase services were determined and have become part of an analysis when requesting additional programs. This year has been difficult, but it has required establishing templates that will be invaluable for future operational management. Mark Bunig presented the September financials, and Parks continues to offset revenue decreases with very efficient cost controls. Golf maintains a successful year with revenue increases and decreases in operational costs. The next finance meeting will be November 10th at 3 p.m. and assuming through WebEx. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you, everybody, for your patience. We are now down to Garrett Jones and his director's report.
Follow. Thank you, Bob, for those kind words. I mean, this has been, again, a lot of pluses, a lot of positives out of something that could be so negative. Nothing, just again, thanks for the park board support communication. I mean, I feel like it's the best transparency and communication we've had in a very long time. And I appreciate all of you and the relationship that we have with the city council and the mayor's office. It feels like there's a lot of positive synergy here in the future. And I think that starts with our 2021 budget and the passing and gives us a direction to move forward. Other than that, I just wanted to announce one piece hot off the press. As you know, through Conservation Futures, we purchased land up at Beacon Hill. And as you know, we applied for 2 grants, one in the LWCF, one in the WWRP for RCO, totaling $1.5 million, including both those grants. We got the results back in our rankings. Of course, this is contingent on the state passing a budget, but not top 10, not top 5, but number 1 in both categories. So kudos Nick Hammond, Paul Knowles in the county, great partnership, my goodness. And that just shows to the amazing commitment and how important this is to the community. It's a big deal, and this really helps then the financial picture for Conservation Futures in the future to be able to acquire others on that list. So huge kudos. That's a big, that's a massive win for this region. So great job, Nick and Paul.
Thank you.
And that is the end of my report.
Great. Thank you. Good news in 2020. All right, Park Board. Jerry, you didn't have a Parks Foundation report, did you?
No, not at this time.
I didn't think so. Okay, so Park Board, you have your emails to look at. I want to thank again the public for their comments. We do read all the emails and we do take your comments into account. And we will see you all at the next meeting. I am adjourning the meeting at 5:43. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jennifer. Nice job.
Thank you, Jennifer. Very well done.
Thank you. Bye, Mark. Good job.